All right, everybody, welcome back to the Strategic Acquisition Workshop. We are still in Module 1, begin with the end in mind. We are going to be covering Session 2 today, which will complete Module 1, or Step 1, as you'll see when we get to the actual 9 steps or 9 modules of this workshop. So, without further ado, what are we going to cover today? So we're going to talk about what type of entity to choose. So this is all about getting your company set up. I get asked all the time, when should we set our company up? When should we set our company up? For most people, they're told, just wait until you have a property under contract, something like that. All right. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but it's better because you're going to have a bunch of expenses up to that point. And you want to be able to flow those expenses through an entity. So let's just knock it out right out of the park. Let's get it done. And since we're tying the strategic acquisition workshop to Acquisition Pro as we get ready to automate our relationship building, in order to be able to do that, you really need to have an entity, or you're not going to be able to send SMS messages. You have to have an employer identification number in order to get approved to be able to send SMS messaging, and we don't want to miss out on that. So it's very, very, very important that we get this company set up as early as possible. So we're going to talk about what type of entity to choose because there are multiple types of entities. How to research your name, the company name that you may or may not want. There is some research that you need to do. You've got to decide if that name is what you also want for your email address. So you're going to need a domain name, or I like to call it space online, leasing space or buying space online. You're going to need to check it for copyright infringement, for trademark infringement, and that the state you're registering it, it's available. So we got to do some research. Then you need to register the company you want to do business with. Once you've identified the name through the research that you want, now you need to register it as the entity type that you choose. Next, we go in and we're going to purchase or lease. Actually, we're going to purchase a domain name and then lease space online to host that domain name. And I'll show you how to do that. And then that all leads to creating your company email. Google and Yahoo came out and said you can no longer send marketing messages to their inboxes if you have a free email address. So if your email address is Google, you can't, or Gmail, you can't send marketing messages via that Gmail address. Google will block it. Okay, so will Yahoo. Now, you're probably thinking, well, not everybody has Google or Yahoo. Here's the statistic. 80% of all emails in the world are on Gmail and Yahoo. 80%. Google has 60, Yahoo has 20. The remaining 20% is everybody else, including business email addresses. Okay. They want you to have a company email. That's why it's important that we do this. If you want to reach your people that you're trying to reach out to, whether it's owners, whether it's investors or whoever, you're going to have a company email address. And then you need a company logo. So we've gone this far. Why not start the branding process? So we'll go really quick on what you should do to create a company logo. All right. Then you're going to have some homework, because this would not be a workshop if you did not have homework. All right. So here's the strategic acquisition workshop. As I said, we are still in begin with the end, or begin at the end in acquisition. So we are in the acquisition phase, and we are still beginning with the end in mind. So quick disclaimer, because there's some legal stuff we're going to talk about here today. I'm not an attorney nor a CPA, and I do not play one on TV or pretend to be one in real or imaginary life. This material is for educational purposes only and should not be considered advice. Consult your own attorney and or CPA for such advice. All right, disclaimer out of the way. Let's get into the education. So what type of entity should we choose? Well, honestly, it's up to you. Now, You have LLCs, limited liability companies. LLCs have only been around since the early 80s, maybe even late 70s. Wyoming was the first state to authorize LLCs as a corporate structure. Then, of course, we have C Corps, S Corps, partnerships, and trusts. Now, I don't know much about trusts. I've never created a trust. We're not going to talk about trusts. I don't know what kind of advantages there are in trusts, or I do. I'm just not willing to mention anything about trust. So even though it's here, I'm not going to talk about trusts at all. Honestly, really not going to talk about any of them except LLCs, because it seems to be what everybody likes to use, specifically for the fact that we're in the real estate business. Okay. And when we're in the real estate business, we want to know what has the best tax advantages. All right. So we've got to look at a couple of things. First is assets. We're going to be buying assets as real estate investors. Now, you have to be careful when doing C Corp or S Corp, because you have to pay tax on the assets inside those corporations. And if you sell an asset inside a corporation, you have to pay a tax on the proceeds that you get from that sale. You don't have to do that in an LLC. An LLC is just a flow-through entity, meaning that you can write off all of your expenses that the IRS says you're allowed to write off, as well as any of the depreciation and everything else you get from real estate assets. And you don't pay any tax in an LLC. It flows through to your personal income tax. All right. So that's why it's called a flow through. In a lot of cases, we'd like to have a negative number coming out of the LLC into our personal income tax so that we can lower our income tax. Hopefully, we can do that with depreciation and some other things. Okay, we don't want to make it look like we don't make any money. We have to make money, or you can't get loans, do other things. But we definitely want, through depreciation and other things, to be able to bring that down to our personal income tax. So that's why LLCs are so attractive. The other is income. Now, the part of LLCs, when you have an LLC, it can be taxed as a corporation. It can be taxed as a partnership. It can be taxed as a sole proprietor. Okay. The issue you're going to run into when dealing with how you're taxed in an entity, and of course, this is for CPAs and attorneys. If you want real advice, this is just my own experience, is if you're a single member LLC, then if you have a state, there's a few states that don't allow it. I know Florida doesn't allow single member LLCs, but if you're in a state that allows it, and there's more that do than don't, then it's really hard for you to get tax advantages, because you're going to end up paying what's called self-employment tax. And that can really hurt your tax situation, because you're paying more in tax than you would if you were an employee. Because as an employee, you are only responsible for half of your Medicare and half of your Social Security. Your employer is responsible for the rest of it. Plus, there's other taxes that you have to deal with as a self-employed individual that you don't worry about when you're a W-2 employee. So you need some protections that won't be as harsh to you, and you can do that with an LLC, but tax that LLC as an S Corp, because now you can be treated as an employee. So instead of taking distributions from the company, you take a salary. And now you can start to employ family members and do other things when you're taxed as an S Corp inside an LLC. What you don't want to do is the LLC that you have, that you're out searching for properties on, you don't want to purchase properties with that LLC. You could put it under contract, but then you want to assign it to a property LLC, which is just taxed as a partnership. You don't tax that as an S Corp, but your umbrella LLC, that primary top one, like for me, Premier Apartment Services LLC, that's my umbrella LLC, and everything else I do underneath it's just doing business as. So Acquisition Pro, I do business as a Premier Apartment Services LLC is my LLC that all of my expenses flow through. Okay. So that's what you have to look at when determining what structure do you want. Okay. Next, you can register that LLC and it can be taxed. We just talked about that. All right. So that's structure. From there, once we decide the structure, and we're going to, for the purpose of this lesson today, we're just going to assume an LLC. So how do we research the name? Well, you go to the Secretary of State's website where you plan to register your LLC or any kind of entity. So now we want to figure out, all right, what name do we want? I know a lot of people in real estate, like when I first started, I did Monroe Investments Group LLC. Talk about something that isn't sellable and was really long and it was crazy. And I closed that entity down and went to Premier Apartment Services LLC, which was even longer, but I did that because of my property management company. And then I just said, I'm not going through this again. I'm just keeping that LLC when I shut down my property management company. But I had to go through these procedures in order to determine, is it even available? So the first is the Secretary of State's website. So if we come out of our PowerPoint and we go to the wrong thing, here we go, Alabama Secretary of State's website. I'm just using Alabama because that's where I live. You can Google whatever state you live, Secretary of State, and it will take you to their Secretary of State's website. Now, what we want to do is we want to search for a name. In this case, I'll use Premier Apartment Services because actually I'm going to use Acquisition Pro because Acquisition Pro is a DBA. It is not an LLC yet. I'm not ready to create the LLC yet. It is coming soon to a theater near you. Just don't need it right now. So Acquisition Pro is a DBA under Premier Apartment Services LLC. So if I come down to Alabama's, I got online services here. But I could also go to services up here, go to business entities, and I can search for, let's see, where is it? Records and record searches, and there's business entity record. So I can search for names there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm going to click on online services. And then when that loads, if I come down, there is business entity name and search. So I'm going to open this in a new tab because we're going to come back to this page later. And if I scroll down, I'm going to search by entity name and I'm going to type in Acquisition Pro LLC. As you can see, I've done this already because I did some pre-work before I started this class today. And we'll see no matches found. Okay, great. So I have found a name that fits. All right, so let's go back. So now I've got my name. I did a Secretary of State website search and that name is available. Now, is it available on GoDaddy? So what we're looking for now is, and you don't have to use GoDaddy, you can use any online registrar for domain names. Now I want to determine, okay, if I'm going to get Acquisition Pro, can I use david@acquisitionpro.com? Right. So next, let's go to GoDaddy. So back to here, I've got GoDaddy up. So let's type in, well, now you know my GoDaddy account number. Let's type in Acquisition Pro. Okay, and hit search domain. It's going to let me know, is this available? And it is for $2,500. Okay. So if I want the name, I can purchase this name on a premium level. Now, I didn't purchase Acquisition Pro, so I have acquisitionpro.io, which I got for a penny for the first year anyway. That's my login. So when you guys log into Acquisition Pro, you go to acquisitionpro.io. And then for my website, it's goacquisitionpro.com, which I only paid the normal $20 a year for, right? At some point, when I'm ready, I will purchase acquisitionpro.com for the $2,500. Right now, that's not going to happen. So, but I've identified, okay, the domain name's available. So, another check. So if I come back, it's available at the Secretary of State, and it's available in GoDaddy. So what's next? Next, we have to look and see, is this name trademarked? Now, this will be interesting because I actually have Acquisition Pro going through the trademark process right now. I actually just got it approved, but it hasn't hit the registry yet. I just literally just got it earlier this week. The email said they've approved it. After 2 weeks ago, they said there was an issue with it. But then I got a letter that said, we've approved it, but it hasn't hit the registry yet. So let's see what, and I didn't look at this yet. So let's go see what USPTO says, which is the trademark office. So next we go to the trademark office. So we're going to come down here, go to trademarks, and we want to search the trademark database. Trademark search system. And search for words or characters in a mark. So I'm going to put in Acquisition Pro, and I'm going to hit search. Well, look at there. That happens to be my logo. Status is live, pending. All right. Hey, that's me. So now I know that Acquisition Pro is not available per the USPTO because somebody already has it. So I could, if I was to continue with this name, I could end up with a trademark violation, and I can end up with a letter from an attorney at some point. Now, does that stop me from registering everything? It doesn't. But what it does do is if the owner of the trademark recognizes that I'm using the same name, I can be issued a cease and desist letter from an attorney or be sued by the owner of the trademark. So this is what we're looking for. And it warms my heart to know that that's sitting there like that. Process is working. So we're going to continue to go as if it's not there because this is mine, and say, okay, USPTO was good. All right, so what's next? Next, we have the U.S. Copyright Office. Okay, we know it's not trademarked, even though it's mine. Now we need to see, is there a copyright against Acquisition Pro before we go any further? So back to our browser and go to copyright.gov. Okay, here, if we scroll down, we have search copyright records. If I click learn more, here's our online record collection, official public catalog from 1978 to present. I'm going to go ahead and go in there, and I'm going to search for Acquisition Pro. Okay, just title. No, name. Okay, so that's all we're going to do is just name and begin search. And let's see. Your search found no results. So Acquisition Pro is not copyrighted. I have not gone through the copyright process yet for Acquisition Pro. I want my trademark to get registered first, and then I am going to copyright Acquisition Pro. Okay. Although I may not be able to because the word acquisition is so vague and the word pro is so vague, but because they're together, they may allow me to register it. We'll see when I go through that. It's a little bit more expensive to get a copyright than it is to get a trademark. So we know that the Acquisition Pro is not a copyright violation. We know that it's not a trademark violation because I own it. We know it's available in GoDaddy, although it's really expensive. And we know it's available at the Alabama Secretary of State because that's where I plan to register it. Okay. So we have all of those in place. So the next thing we need to do is just go ahead and get it registered now before somebody else does. So registering our entity. Okay. We go back to the state and we have to do a name registration. So let's go back to, and every state has this, back to Alabama's Secretary of State. All right, remember this? Well, if I go back down here, let's go back to this one, to online services, and I keep coming down, we've got domestic formation right here. So if I click on domestic formation, click next, what I'm looking for is just name reservation, filing, or transfer. That's what I want to do first. But you have to do an application, you'll get approved for this, pay your $27, and you'll get a proof of name certificate that the name is available. All right. Once you have that, then we can start the filing process. So you'll just have to look for your state. How do I register a name for whatever state in Google? And you can find this same information. So now I've got my state registration name available, and it's just a certificate that says you now have reserved this name for the next 12 months. So you have 12 months, at least in the state of Alabama, to form that entity. Right now, it's just a name reservation. So now at that point, once you have that, because you need that in order to get an EIN, now you can go and get your employer identification number. And we do that through irs.gov. So, oh my God, we got to go to the IRS's website. Sorry, it is what it is. Let's go to the IRS's website. So here's IRS. This is their homepage, irs.gov. And if you look, we can see right here, apply for an employer ID number. It used to be free. I think it still is. It's real easy to go through. They have an online application, and by the time you finish the application, you are issued your EIN. It is really fast. But you need this EIN to do anything else. You can't get a bank account yet. You can't register the LLC or through the state or county or city yet. You can't do anything without this EIN. You can't get A2P certified through Acquisition Pro without an EIN. So even if you're going to be a sole proprietor, you still have to have an EIN, all right, in order to get that SMS approval in order to send text messaging. So that's the importance here. We need this EIN number. So that's how you do that. That's real simple. Just start the online application process and you'll get that number. It'll be 2 digits, a dash, and then I think it's 6 more digits, and that becomes your EIN. Real easy one, quickest one to achieve. Then we go back to the Secretary of State's website. Boy, we're having all kinds of fun on that one, aren't we? And we actually have to, and not search, that shouldn't say search. We actually have to file our certificate of formation. Oh, you can search for filing a certificate of formation, otherwise known as articles of organization. Okay, so whichever your state calls it, certificate of formation or articles of organization, that is the same thing. So if we go back to Alabama's website and we go back to online services, okay, once we've got our name registration, next we do domestic filing. All right, so you can either do this online, or it may tell you, and I think if you go through the process online with Alabama, that it's going to say, it's going to let you file it. You got the Secretary of State fee, the county fee. Well, it lets you do everything right here. So now you can do an online application. When I did mine back in 2016, there was no online process. I actually had to take in triplicate, I had to print out the articles of organization, go down to the county courthouse and file it in triplicate so they could stamp all 3. One stays at the county, one goes to the state, and one goes to my records. But it has to have that stamp that it's been recorded. All right. Do not buy into the fact that a company will try to sell you on expedited services. You don't need expedited services. As soon as you click the submit button online, or as soon as you get the stamp on the document they hand back to you, even though it hasn't been recorded yet, you can do business. Okay, that's the date you can start doing business as an LLC in this case. All right, at least in the state of Alabama. Again, I'm not an attorney, nor do I pretend to be one or play one in real or imaginary life. So please consult an attorney to determine whether you can actually do that or not. But in the state of Alabama, we are authorized to start conducting business the moment that county recorder stamps that document right in front of us when I'm standing at the county recorder. I'm going to assume, and again, it's an assume, and we know what assume means, that you can do the same thing once you hit the submit button after submitting the application and filling out the articles of organization or certificate of formation online, which is real simple information. The one thing you're going to need, and I did not talk about it in the PowerPoint, is you're going to need what's called a registered agent. And a registered agent does not have to be an attorney or a CPA. It could be your cousin. It could be a friend of yours. It can be anybody that is not living in your household. So that's what they consider arm's length. It has to be, or non-arm's length. It cannot be arm's length, meaning somebody in my immediate household. So if I have a cousin that lives in Baldwin County, he could be my registered agent. Now he needs to be in the same state. Doesn't have to be in the same county, but he must be in the same state, or she. It could be your CPA. It could be an attorney friend of yours. It could be your real estate agent, okay? Or if you're a real estate agent, it could be your real estate broker. All a registered agent is the person that's responsible. It's got to be somebody that isn't you that is responsible for notification from the IRS or from the state if there's an issue, if there's been something filed against you or some kind of notice that's really important. It's going to go through that registered agent. That will be required to be put on your articles of organization or certificate of formation, whichever it is that you have for this recording. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Back to here. Next, you can create an operating agreement. Now, operating agreements are optional. You don't have to have one. If you have partners, you're going to want an operating agreement. Do not get involved with partners in any entity structure without an operating agreement, because it spells everything out about how to run that entity between those partners. If it's just you and your wife or some other family member, then you don't really have to have an operating agreement. Or if it's a single member LLC, you don't really have to have an operating agreement. But every step of the road, you're going to be asked to see your operating agreement. Like when you go to get your bank account, the bank is going to say, we need a copy of your operating agreement. Now, don't be afraid, because I've done this every single time. Don't be afraid to tell them no, because the operating agreement is a private document. It is not public record. The articles of organization or the certificate of formation, and you must provide them that. But they always ask for the operating agreement. All you have to do is say, I don't have one. It's not required, or that is a private document. That is not something that's got personal information on it that we are not willing to share with you. Will you accept our articles of organization or our certificate of formation? They may or may not know that term because nobody's argued with them before. They'll go talk to their branch manager. The branch manager say, oh yeah, that's really all we need. Okay. I've never had an issue doing that. So operating agreements, optional. There will be an example of an operating agreement. It is a template. Okay. Nothing more than a template. It is not to be used as a legal document. It is just a template. It will be in the description. I'll have a link to it underneath the recording when this gets put up on YouTube, so you can download it. All right. Again, it is just a templated document. It is not a legal form. I cannot express that deep enough. Then go open your checking and savings account. So you want a business checking, you're going to need your EIN, and you're going to need that articles of organization. Okay, so you have to have those two pieces. Then you can open a savings account. If there's going to be escrowed funds, you want to open a savings account, and you want to call it an escrow account, and here's why. Your checking account is probably going to have a fee to it unless you keep a certain balance in it. Most checking accounts do. But for a savings account, you'll have the same thing. If you don't keep a minimum fee or do a minimum number of brain farting. You don't have a minimum number of deposits to it, they'll charge you a fee every month. But if you call it an escrow account, they cannot charge a fee. It's just a way to get around paying that fee of your savings account. So call it, if you're going to have a savings account, call it an escrow account, then they can't charge you a fee. So woohoo! But what you don't want to do is commingle If it is an escrow and you call it an escrow, you cannot commingle it with that business checking account, which becomes your operating account. All right. That's where your operating account comes from. So that's the next step. Get those opened up. Whoop. There we go. Next, that's creating the entity. Now your entity is created. Now we need some additional pieces of information. We need a domain name. We need some space that we got to lease online so that we can store that domain name or host that domain name so that we can create our email address or addresses. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, first we got to go to an online registrar. Now we're purchasing our domain name. So I said purchase and lease. When we buy the domain name, we are purchasing that name. Now, I say that loosely because if you do not renew, because it's going to be an annual payment, if you do not renew that annual fee, then the registrar can take that name back. So technically, even though I say purchasing, really, you're still just leasing even that name. You don't own it. All right. So ICANN, ICANN, they own all the domain names. We just lease them from ICANN. I like to use GoDaddy. You can also use Namecheap. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go in and show you how to purchase the domain name because it's pretty self-explanatory. We showed you how to search it, found it, add it to the cart, purchase the domain name. All right. That's real simple to do and should not require any training on my part to show you how to do that. If you do need to know how to do that, in my capital raising workshop that is on the YouTube channel, I think it's 3 or 4 playlists down the primary channel page, I do walk through purchasing a brand new name where I register it with GoDaddy, I register it in HostGator, and I show you how to do all the DNS changes and all that. All right. I do have other videos on that if you need to see it, but it goes beyond the scope of this particular lesson. So I'm not going to show you how to purchase a domain name, primarily because I'm not really interested in purchasing a domain name right now, and I don't want to go buy another one. Once you've got your domain name, now we got to get domain hosting. This is definitely where we are leasing that space online. I personally use HostGator. I've used HostGator since 2007 or 8. Been with them a long time. Have had no issues with them whatsoever. Uptime is like 99.99998%. I mean, it is never down, just never down. It just never is. And then there's Bluehost. And I've heard good things about Bluehost. I'm not saying anything bad about Bluehost. It is another host out there. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of registrars and hosts. These are just the 2 most popular that are used for purchasing, hosting, or purchasing a domain name. Now, GoDaddy will tell you, Namecheap will tell you, we can host your websites here. That's not their expertise. HostGator and Bluehost will tell you you can purchase your domain names here. That is not their expertise. You don't want to be locked into something that you're not going to be able to get out of later. And as you'll find as we go through the process of moving some of the DNS records to Acquisition Pro, so you can do business in Acquisition Pro or any other software that you decide to use, that the more specific the company is that locks you down, the harder you're going to be able to do that. Like Wix. If you buy your domain and do your web host inside Wix, Wix does not allow you to do anything outside of Wix. Squarespace is the other one that it is very, very difficult to be able to use other services when they're hosting everything in that one area, which is why I like a registrar and a host to be separate. And it's real easy to get them to talk to each other. All right. So before we talk about creating the email, let me go in and show you back to the browser. If I go over to my WHM, we're going to go, since we've been doing Acquisition Pro, we're just going to stay in Acquisition Pro. So we're going to go to Go Acquisition Pro. And this is the cPanel. that we're getting ready to talk about. So what we did in GoDaddy is we had to change our name servers. And my name servers, now they're not on this. The name servers will be found if you have a shared account. They'll be found along this panel right here so that you can give GoDaddy those name servers and move them over to your HostGator account. All right, now I show you how to do this in Acquisition Pro, so you don't need to worry about how to do that right now. Right now, you just need to know that this is where we're going. This is the cPanel. So once we're in the cPanel, the first thing we want to do is we want to create our company email. So you want cPanel access. Okay, just showed you the cPanel. And you can create as many accounts as needed. So let's go back in there. And if we go to email accounts, okay, here are the email accounts that I have. And all you have to do is create your domain extension, or your URL is already here. So you just put in what you want here. So if I wanted to do one for support, I could just create support at goacquisitionpro.com, give it a password, and I'm just going to put something in here that it wants because I'm not really going to use this. And you can hit edit settings and you can increase the amount of storage space. So this is the amount of emails that you leave in the inbox, the space. Now each email is probably just a single KB or maybe 2 or 3 KBs, depending on how long it is. If it's got some images, it might be a little bit more. But this is the amount of space that you're allowing yourself for storage. I like to put unlimited because you get unlimited within your accounts anyway. So I just put it to unlimited so I never hit that brick, and then just hit create. All right. It's that simple. Now I just created a company email address. Now, for emailing purposes, you can use something like support. Do not use the word no reply, because that will get sent to spam or to promotions if it's in Gmail. Support probably is going to go to promotions, even if you use it. Could possibly go to spam. Haven't really tested it. I don't personally like to use support at my domains. I actually have a support ticket system that I use. Just use your name. Your first name, for me, David. I'm David Monroe. I could use D Monroe. I could use David.Monroe. I could just do David Monroe. Whatever that naming convention is, keep it the same for all the email addresses that you create. All right. That personalizes it, even though it's a company email. Google and Yahoo will like it better. Better chance it's going to hit that inbox. Now, there's many, many more things you have to go through to get it in the inbox, but that's just step one. All right. So now we have to be able to send email out, and we do that through SMTP settings. Now, you could purchase a workspace account in Google to be able to do this. So I now have support at goacquisitionpro.com. I could go and purchase for $10 a month a Google workspace account, or whatever it's charged today. I don't know, maybe it's up to $12 a month. I've had one for David at davidmonroeccim.com for years. You could go that route. If you do that, you're going to lock in David at davidmonroeccim.com on that specific email address. Although there are ways you can move that SMTP over to be able to send from other things. And I've done that with my David at David Monroe through Kartra. And it seemed to work even though I had that workspace account. But you can have a Gmail account and use Gmail to view emails that you send from your new email address. All right. And there's a separate video that can show you how to do that. But first, we have to configure our SMTP settings. So whatever server you're using, whether you're using Acquisition Pro or you're using SendGrid or any of these other ones, Mailgun is who Acquisition Pro uses. ActiveCampaign's another one. Aweber, you have all these different SMTP servers that will send. You can't receive on these servers, but you can send from there to get your marketing message out. So if I go back to my cPanel, we need to know a couple of things. First thing, if I go to tools, and I'm going to open this in a new tab. If I come over to tools and I go to my zone editor under domains, here is where, when you are told either from Google or from SendGrid or from Acquisition Pro or ActiveCampaign or any of them, they're going to say you need to change, you need to add a TXT, a couple of TXT records, a CNAME record, maybe some MX records. This is where you do it in the zone editor. Click manage, and here's where you can start to add all those records. You can see where I've got those records added for goacquisitionpro.com, right? This is where I would add those records. And there are different types. There's you'll never use these two, AAA or CAA. CAA may be Canadian, not sure. Don't know what the 4As is, but you will use CNAME, you will use DMARC, you will use MX, SRV, and TXT. Now, this is brand new, DMARC. It used to be we just added a TXT record, and then what'll happen is, let's see if they did it automatically. Nope, they left it as a TXT. You'll see that my DMARC is right here for Go Acquisition Pro, and it is a TXT record, right? But now, HostGator will allow you to just add that DMARC record. And again, don't expect you to understand what that is right now. When you get Acquisition Pro or one of those other tools, they will tell you what you need to add for that. At least I hope they would, for that DMARC record, or just reach out to me and I'll show you how to do it. It's real simple to do, but we can now do it as an actual DMARC record. So that's interesting. I may test that out on a couple of my things, but this is where those SMTP settings happen. But that's for sending email. We still need to receive. Okay. So there's a few ways we can receive it. You can receive it through Gmail. You can receive it through Outlook. And I didn't put it on here, but you can also receive through an what's called an OWA, an online web application, online web app. All right. So if I go back in to here, you can see that if I go back to my email account, I can check mail. So David at Go. Well, let's try this support one because I don't need you to see actual emails in here. Let's go to the support at goacquisitionpro.com. And now I can open this online web app, and I click open. You're going to need to do this initially anyway. So here's where the system has added it, and it gives me the information I need in order to add this to either Outlook, to Apple Mail, to Google, wherever you're going to add it. You've got to have this information. All right. And when you set this up through Gmail, if you're going to do it through Gmail, they're going to send you a code that you're then going to have to go back to Gmail for security, so they know you own that email address. And this is where you're going to receive that initial email. So you're going to want this open anyway. Now, one thing I do is I actually like this web app. So I took this web app and I actually use this as my main email address for goacquisitionpro.com, believe it or not. And I just save it as a tab when I open my browser. I actually like this app. My calendar is still on Google, but this keeps all of my Go Acquisition Pro emails separate from my David at David Monroe CCIM and other email addresses that I have inside of that. So I like having it like this. But if you're going to use Gmail, or you're going to use Outlook, or you're going to use Apple Mail or any of those other ones, these are the settings that you need. Now, keep in mind of this one right here. Your client may just want you to use this first part as the username, but it needs to be the whole email address. So just be careful with that. And then whatever the password was that you set up. All right. So that's how we receive email. All right. Final thing. Now we have our name. We've registered it with a state. So we now have an LLC. We've purchased our bank account so we can do business. We've bought our domain name. We now have space that we've leased online. We've created our email addresses that we're going to use, and we've moved them to our sending servers and added them to our receiving servers so that we could send and receive email. The last thing that you have to do to complete your company setup is you need a logo. Okay, we got to build a logo, however you decide you want to do that. So you can do it yourself. And you can use Canva or Adobe. Canva, honestly, you don't need Adobe if you have Canva. Canva is a very, very inexpensive. I think it's like 12 bucks a month for the pro version. And you can do everything Adobe does, but it's drag and drop and it's so simple. And it even sizes everything for you appropriately for whatever it is you're doing. Canva is very, very powerful. It's an online resource. You don't need to download software like you do with Adobe. So I would not recommend using Adobe. I'd recommend using Canva if you're going to build it yourself. But you still may need a starting point. So you can go to a bunch of sites if you wanted to get royalty-free images. In other words, images that you can use that somebody else created that they have put up to these resources where you don't have to pay for them. That's why they're royalty-free. But you might have to pay for the service to go get those. Pixabay is free. iStock Photo is not. I think Unsplash is free. Shutterstock is not. And if you have Adobe, there's Adobe Stock Image, which is what I use. And again, it's not free. Okay. But that will give you a great starting point. Get a template from one of those. Just search logos, or if you're wanting to do like multifamily, you can search apartment logo or multifamily logo or commercial real estate logo, CRE logo, something like that. Put something to it. You could use AI. I don't recommend using AI. It's not really there yet. It can produce some really weird results. And usually if you're using AI, you've got to pay for those results. So be very careful using AI to create these, but you can do it. I've seen some people that have used AI and have been lucky and had some success doing it, but it's still in the infinite phases. It will get better. The other thing you can do is hire a VA. This is what I recommend doing. I've built some of mine on my own. I've hired a VA to do some of my logos. Okay. I have a training video on the YouTube channel. If you go to the multifamily how-tos on how to hire a VA. Okay. So it explains exactly how I've done it. And I use Online Jobs PH in order to find those resources or people that can do that. There is one website called 99 Designs. You actually end up bidding for, or the people on 99 Designs will bid to be able to do your project. And they send you examples so that you can see them before actually accepting the winner. It's probably going to cost you more to do something like that on 99 Designs than it would be to hire a VA at onlinejobs.ph. All right, let's talk about homework. Identify your entity type. My guess is more likely it's going to be an LLC, and start to choose a name and research that name to make sure that it is, one, available at the Secretary of State's website where you're going to register it. Two, that it is available on GoDaddy, that it does not have a trademark infringement or a copyright infringement. At that point, go ahead and secure that name registration with the Secretary of State. Get your employer identification number through irs.gov. Complete and file your certificate of formation or articles of organization, whichever you want to call it or your state calls it, through your county, state, however your state does it. Open your business checking account. And if you want to do a savings account at the same time while you're there, you can. And again, slight recommendation of setting it as an escrow account. Just remember, you cannot commingle the two if you do that. Purchase your domain name and lease your online real estate, whether you use GoDaddy, whether you use Namecheap or any of the other online registrars, or for hosting, whether it's HostGator or Bluehost or any of the other service providers. That's totally up to you. And then create your company email address or addresses and create your company logo. I wouldn't worry about creating your SMTP records or any of that information yet. Just get the email addresses and the company logo, because wherever it is that you're going to go to send from for your marketing, they're going to have the process. Hopefully it's with Acquisition Pro. We're going to have the process on exactly what to add to your DNS settings, and we'll provide all that information. And depending on what level of service you have will be whether you have to do it yourself through watching training videos or whether somebody will help you do it for you and different processes like that, right? So that's your homework. For those that are here live, stay here. You do not have to go anywhere. For those that are watching this on YouTube, email me, david@davidmonroeccim.com, and I will give you access to the Wednesday night meetings. So if you have any questions, you can join us Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, and I will answer them to the best of my ability at that point.